Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. I am Tammy. Today I am here with Richard T-Bear, also known as T-Bear, and he is a talented singer, songwriter, and pianist, and has collaborated with musicians such as Crosby, Stills and Nash, Cher, and so many others. He has recently released on RCA Valley Records a new album entitled The Way of the World, and it boasts 12 original tracks written or co-written by T-Bear himself, showcasing his talent. And I had a chance to, one of the really cool things about being a podcaster is getting albums either early and free. So it's been really nice, and I love it. Like it jams, and it's so much fun, and I can't wait to dig in and talk about the inspiration that you had for it and all of that. So, hello.
Hello. Well, it's nice to be here, and I'm glad to talk about this album. The original inspiration for this album, I have to go back 3 years and show you this one.
That's a really cool looking cover.
That's a story in itself, but this album was done because of my late wife, Nina. I had gotten divorced after 20 years of marriage and raising 3 kids, and met her, and she was a big music lover, and she said, I know who you are, and you haven't done anything musically in 25 years. Why is that? I said, because I was raising kids. I went out and got a day job. I was selling light bulbs for a living, almost door to door at one point, and got divorced. And now I'm, kind of living my life the way I kind of want to live it. And she said, well, I know who you are, and I know what you do, and I know who you played with, and I know what records I have at home that you're on. And the reason why I know that is because my ex was a guitar player in your band 25 years ago.
Oh, wow. What a small world there.
Wow, small world, right? Really small world. I went, oh, great. So she said, you're a really interesting guy, and yeah, I'll go out on a date with you, and I'll learn about you. And she said, and I will continue to date you because you're the only musician I have ever met that had a day job. And I went, oh, that's interesting. So we started seeing each other. She had impeccable musical taste. She could play piano as well, write and read. And then she went back to school to get her degree at UCLA. And we fell in love, and I moved in with her, and we got married. We got married, and she would sit on the other side of the piano at her desk, which was right on the other side of the piano, and very close. It wasn't one of those grand pianos. It was more like a spinet piano. And she'd say, play me a song while I'm doing my homework. And I'd play it for her. And she'd say, okay, now play me one of your songs. I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, play me some original stuff. And I'd play her some things off some of my older albums. And she goes, all right, play me a new song. And I went, I don't have one. She goes, well, start writing one now. And she nagged me, and I started writing, and she'd go, that's a hook. That's a musical hook. Keep that. Nah, maybe this one throw out. And so we had that kind of a thing going on between us, and I was madly in love, and we really hit it off well. And I went to a session that I was playing on at Robbie Krieger's studio, which was called Horse Latitudes. That was the name of his studio. Robbie Krieger was the guitar player in The Doors. And I was doing a session over there, and he came over to me at a break, and he said, "Man, when are you going to do some more of your records? I really like your records. I really like the way you play. You play in the, you know, in the way that Ray played, and in the way that some of my favorite people play. They don't play like you anymore." And I went, "Oh, okay." I said, "I don't know. I don't have deep pockets. I'm not going to, make a record, I don't think. And there's nobody going to sign me, out of the blue." I said, and it's money, I mean, who has a whole lot of money to make an album? I said, "Your place is amazing and it's going to cost a lot of money." He says, "Forget the money. I'll give you the place as long as it takes for you to make a record. All I want you to do is pay the engineer. You have the studio." And that's what happened. I stayed there for the next, I don't know, year and a half on days when they weren't, busy. And I'd go in there and cut tracks. And I cut 23 tracks, 21 originals that I wrote on the other side of Nina's desk. And we put this great album together. Everybody in the world showed up to help me with it. Stephen Stills played on it. Edgar Winter played on it. Robbie Krieger played on it. Some of the guys from the Heartbreakers, from Tom Petty's band, played on it. Some of the guys from Steely Dan played on it. Some of the guys from the E Street Band horn section played on it. I mean, it was just one great musician after another. The late Mike Finnegan played on it. Everybody showed up to help me with this. It was great. And the guy that produced it was a guy called Tony Bronigal. And he is a drummer, and he played with Bonnie Raitt, did Nick and Time with her. Played with Taj Mahal, Little Feat, Robert Cray. I mean, he's a great producer, record producer. And he says, "I'm going to help you because you landed me and saved my job with Ricky Lee Jones once, and that launched my career." And he says, "And I owe you for that." And I said, "Okay, done." So he produced the record, and he produced it for On the Cheap. And everybody did it for On the Cheap. And the record was almost finished. And we got some bad news, and Nina was diagnosed stage 4 cancer, and they gave her 4 months to live. And she lived another 8, 9, 10, 11 months. And I was her caregiver. I took care of her. I was with her all the time. And just before she passed, she wrote me a letter, and she said on the letter, she said, "Here's what I want you to do, and this is my letter to you. I want you to never cancel another gig. I want you to go out on tour. I want you to live your best life. I want you to finish this record no matter what. Don't worry about labels or anything like that. And at some point when you're ready, fall in love again." And it was a beautiful, letter. I read it like once a week, and I owe her my career now, because I look, the last song on the record is Nina's song, and
Aw.
and they play that on Paris radio every day because they're so sentimental, and it's a sentimental song, and it's a beautiful song, and it was the first song that I wrote to start writing again. It's dedicated to her, and there would be no Way of the World if it wasn't for Fresh Bear Tracks. And so Fresh Bear Tracks is an offshoot of that album. And there are 2 tracks on Fresh Bear Tracks that I call attention to. One is called This Bird Has Flown, and the other one is called They Can Kill You. And those are 2 titles that didn't make it onto Fresh Bear Track. So we used 2 of those. And that's leads us up to the reason why I made this record, is because she passed away. COVID hit. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know what to do. So I just started writing stories, short stories. I write lyrics before I write the songs. And I started writing songs again because I knew she would want me to do that. And I got signed to a record deal with Fresh Bear Tracks. They loved the album so much, and they knew it was behind the 8 ball because of COVID. So they said, "We want another one from you." And they asked me to do another one, and I have the songs, and I started writing them, and putting them together. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I wanted to call like an homage, and I wanted to make it a little bit retro. So
How about you tell me about your favorite 3 songs on your new album? If you've been feeling burned out, stressed, overwhelmed, or exhausted, the resources and courses at the Self-Care Institute are here to support you. The Self-Care Institute was founded by Dr. Ami Kunimura and provides support for individuals and organizations with burnout prevention, burnout recovery, and stress management. I've personally taken a few of these courses and found them to be super helpful, both professionally and personally. The care you give yourself matters just as much as the care you give to others. But if self-care is difficult for you, you're not alone. And the Self-Care Institute is here to support your well-being, resilience, and sense of fulfillment at work and at home. For more information, visit selfcareinstitute.com or go to the show notes and click on the link.
Ooh, you're asking me which one of my children I like best.
I know.
That's okay. Breathe, because it's therapy. It's musical therapy. It's therapy. Therapy.
I like that word.
Yeah, because that's a song that I wrote in 10 minutes, and I had to sing it to myself many times during COVID to calm myself down, because I was ready to pull my hair out. For so many different reasons, and I needed to hear myself breathe. So that one. Jewel, I think, and it's not about Jewel, by the way. It's this week I'm loving that song. And I'm liking Before the Fall and Dinner for One. I like a lot of these. It's the kind of album that you can go through them and you'll get a reaction, an internal reaction from the songs. So maybe those 3 or those 4, and that's this week. And then next week it'll be like, I don't know, True Romance or The Way of the World or Sign on the Dotted Line, if I'm getting sued or something.
You mentioned that you start with lyrics, and I'm like that too, because I write poetry, and most of the poetry never turns into songs. So take me a little bit through your creative process, like what you love, what you don't like,
Okay, I can use an example on the record. I love movies. I love really good episodic television that's different and challenging. I like comedies. Nina used to watch a lot of Turner movies, black and white movies and things, which I thought were amazing. I didn't have a clue until I started going out with her, and we'd have like these movie popcorn nights, and I'd watch like Meet Me in St. Louis and The Philadelphia Story, and I never saw Gone with the Wind until I met her, and I'd watch things like that. And I had a friend that could never remember the name to Gone with the Wind, so he'd go like, "Remember that movie with Rhett?" I'd say, "Yeah, it was." He'd go, the one, the wind took it away. And I'd go, "You mean Gone with the Wind?" Yeah, and he'd go, "Yeah, that's the one." So I'd write. So one day I was watching a movie on TV, and it was a thing called Walter Mitty. You know the story of Walter Mitty?
Vaguely.
Okay, Walter Mitty. The original story was a Danny Kaye movie, like in the 50s or 60s.
Oh, I love Danny Kaye.
Yeah, so Danny Kaye was Walter Mitty. I like stuff like that. I like retro stuff. So Danny Kaye was this kind of, accountant, kind of nerdy kind of guy, and he would daydream, and then the whole scene would change, and he would be like, the fireman that runs up the ladder to rescue the damsel, and she looks at him, and he looks at her, and off into the sunset they walk. That's kind of what Walter Mitty was. Then I came out with Kristen Wiig and Sean Penn, and I can't think of the other guy right now. His parents were comic actors, Ben Stiller. And Ben Stiller, right? And I watched that one, and it was pretty good, but it wasn't Danny Kaye, but it was still pretty good. And, then I kind of thought to myself, I'm going to write a short story about Walter Mitty. So I wrote Walter Mitty's Glasses, a short story. What it was a guy goes into a antique kind of store where they have all these kiosks set up. Everybody brings their stuff in there to sell and they leave it on consignment, that kind of a place. And he walks in there and he goes up to the counter of one of these kiosks, and it's all sunglasses and fancy glasses and this and that. And he takes glasses and he puts them on and he looks in the mirror and he goes, no. And then he takes another pair up and he looks in the mirror and says, and then he finds another pair of glasses, puts it on, looks in the mirror, and there's somebody else looking back at him. And he takes them off and it's him. He puts them back on, it's somebody else. And he's handsome and he's tanned and his hair is perfect and he's wearing a suit. And he says to the guy, he says, where did you get these glasses? He says, oh, a guy comes in with a box of them every month and tries to sell them to me. So I buy like 20 or 30 pairs and I try to sell them. He said, well, whose glasses are these? He said, I wouldn't know. And he looks at the glasses and he looks inside one of the arms of the glasses and says, property of Walter Mitty. And he goes, wow, that starts the song. Walter Mitty puts on his glasses and he sees a woman across the way and he knows she's going to leave with him. So that's where that came from. So that's kind of an homage to reggae and 10cc and people like that. The Way of the World is an homage to Bob Dylan. I like the way he writes his lyrics. Before the Fall is an homage to maybe Brian Wilson, Mozart, and Amy Winehouse. I mashed them all up together.
That is quite an interesting combination.
Yeah, I thought so. That's why I came up with that. I was always a, Pet Sounds and big Beach Boy fan. This Bird Has Flown is a line in a Beatles song, and I've always loved that line. And so I put it to a song. Dinner for One is the Buena Vista Social Club homage, which was an amazing documentary that I fell in love with. And I grew up in the Caribbean. I was born in New York, but I grew up in the Caribbean, and I always listened to Latin music because I lived in Puerto Rico and some of the islands. I thought that they had the most beautiful romantic lyrics, and the way they presented certain events in their lives were unlike anything I'd ever heard. So that's what Dinner for One is. It's all about somebody that prepares this amazing meal, this amazing dinner, and he's all dressed up, and people think he's mad in his building, where he lives, because he does this and he goes out of his way, and she's not coming, and it's just a dinner for one. True Romance is a song I liked because I wanted to write anybody that was getting married a good song that they could dance to on their wedding dance, their wedding night. I'm a romantic at heart.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you. They Can Kill You. Well, that's simply because you women have got the power, and there's so many ways you kill us. You have hundreds of ways that you can, knock us off. And let's see, A Change Will Do Me Good. It's from COVID. I'm lounging in the Barker 5 days a week. My lows are multiplying and my groove has sprung a leak. That says it all. Sign on the dotted line is someone that shouldn't have gotten married. So it's the opposite. I want to do something for someone's marriage, and I want to claim you shouldn't have done that, on the other end. And Red Harvest is one of my favorite songs that I've written, because my best songs come in like 10 minutes. I can sit down and 10 minutes later they're finished. Red Harvest was what I wrote. It's a poem I wrote about the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I saw that on CNN. I was horrified, and I started writing. And my father was born in Warsaw. His family had come through the Ukraine. And I know that the Ukrainian people, their country is the breadbasket. They have sunflowers. They make oil. They make wheat. They make grain for the world. It's a breadbasket country. And I thought to myself, there'll be no harvest this year with what's going on. The only harvest there'll be is a red harvest.
Mm.
And so I wrote that, and because I saw women and children and old ladies fleeing for their lives on trains, buses, cars, bicycles, horses, walking to get out of there to head to the border of Poland. And the husbands, brothers, and sons had to stay and fight. And most of them never held a gun in their lives because they were conscripted into the army. And so I called the guy at the label, the head of the label, Bruce Quarto, the guy, the guy that signed me. I said, "Hey, we got to do something about this. I'd like to write a song, and we make the proceeds available to the Ukrainian Red Cross and the World Kitchen."
Mm. That's wonderful.
And yeah, and the World Kitchen is the place where the 6 people that worked for the World Kitchen just lost their lives in the Gaza.
Mm.
that were killed by a bombing. And I loved what World Kitchen had been doing for years, and this is 2 years ago, and I said, "Bruce, can we do something?" And he said, "Yeah, we can do something. I like these lyrics." He gave me a little tiny budget to go in the studio, and in Lawrence Juber's house, the co-producer of Way of the World album. I got a hold of my label mate from the immediate family, Leland Sklar. You know Lee at all? Leland, it looks like Dumbledore. He's got a big white long beard, and he played on 500 of your favorite albums. He played bass. He played with everyone from Carole King's Tapestry through all the James Taylor records, through all the Phil Collins records. I can go on and on and on, but that's who Leland is. And I got him, and I got a bunch of people. We got one in Lawrence's studio. I called David Crosby up because I had played with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and knew David, and I thought he'd be a great voice on that. And I said, "Hey man, you got to do this with us. We're going to put it out. We're going to raise some money for the Ukrainian Red Cross, and we're going to do it right away." "Well, I can't do it for about a week or this or that." And so, "Are you sure?" He says, "Yeah, call me like in about 2 weeks. I think I can do it then." And we were and I thought, who else can I get? I couldn't think of anybody. And I got a phone call out of the blue. And a guy goes, "Hey, it's Paul," with a British accent. And he says, "I want to sing with you." And I said, "You're not a singer, you're a lawyer, and you can't sing with me, Paul." And I thought it was my lawyer, Paul Quinn, from my music attorney, Paul Quinn, right? He sounded exactly like my music attorney. And I said, "Why are you taking the piss out of me? You're not going to sing." "No." "You might read a brief, but you're not going to sing." And he says, "No, no, no, it's Paul Rogers from Bad Company."
I love Bad Company.
Okay, so he calls me up because Bruce Quarto sent the lyrics to Paul Rogers' wife, who's Ukrainian.
Mm.
She reads it, gives it to Paul. They hear the track, and Paul calls me himself, and he goes, "Oh, I want to sing on this, mate." And I went, "Okay, sounds like a plan." I sent him the stuff, and unlike Crosby, it was done in 2 days and finished. So I really like Paul Rogers for doing that and stepping up. And he and I had met many, many years earlier when my first album came out on RCA, and we were both in a TV show in Munich together. And so he reminded me of that because his drummer got me drunk, and they tried to sabotage my set. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So Red Harvest is a really good song. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
That's a bonus track.
What I love about not only you and your music is that you aren't afraid to just write how you feel. You're not afraid to go the political route. You're not afraid to go the route of just bearing your soul and your heart and being vulnerable. And like you said, you're a romantic. I love that. And that's what I think art is about most times. It's just bearing your soul or figuring out who you are via, that artistic vehicle, you know?
I agree. I agree. I love that you're a poet. And have you heard this record yet at
That
all?
one, no, I have not.
All right, you should pick this one up. I think you'll find some songs on there that are really going to move you. And there's a poem on here on that with a spoken word kind of thing that Robbie Krieger from the Doors plays on. It was one of the conditions that I have his studio that he played on the record. and he and it's called Wonderland, and it's all about Laurel Canyon. It's all about the things that go on up there. And Nina and her daughter helped me write that. They both gave me two lines for that, and it came from a poem I wrote called Malice, not Alice, but Malice in Wonderland.
Mm.
And I think you'll like that. It was all about. I won't even tell you what it's about. You'll figure it out. But that being said, yeah, I'm writing the next album, and it's called The Book of Secrets.
Ooh,
Yeah,
nice.
and
That's a good
because
title.
you know our Book of Secrets, it's right here. It's right here. And it's all about people that need to be acknowledged for what they've done or what they do or how they've lived. The first song, The Book of Secrets, is the ballad of J.D. Salinger.
I love JD Salinger.
Okay, so every song is going to be a chapter on the album. And J.D. Salinger is the first one in the Book of Secrets. The next chapter is going to be No Reservations, Anthony Bourdain. It's going to be him.
I love the way your mind works, T Bear. It's like you're plugged into me.
Oh, wow. You know, I'm glad you appreciate and you can follow this route I'm taking you on because I think it's really important to do this kind of work. I just want to remain genuine and authentic, and I don't want to do what's expected of you by somebody else that says, well, you got to do it this way, and you got to only have two chords, and it's only going to have this one line that's going to be said 17 times in a row, and no, that's not what I do. You know,
Mhm.
my great songwriting heroes never did that. Bob Dylan never did that. Paul Simon never did that. John Prine, who's the reason why I became a songwriter, seeing him one night in 1971. This is the real deal. This
Mhm.
is what we should do. This is what we have to do. And I want to carry the torch for certain people that are gone, that have lost their voice in this way, that have passed. Leon Russell, for example, Nicky Hopkins, Dr. John. Um, that's the way I play. And thank you for acknowledging that I connected with you in that way. It really meant a lot to me. It really does. The next couple of things I'm writing on the Book of Secrets, I know I should be talking about The Way of the World, but we kind of connected on that other kind of strain. I'm writing about a guy that hijacked a plane in Seattle. He stole a plane. He was a ground baggage handler and tow truck driver for Horizon Air, and he pulled an airplane out of the hangar, got into it, fired the engines up. He wasn't a pilot. He learned how to fly on a simulator program on his Xbox, and this is like 5 years ago, and flew around Seattle and Tacoma for like 2 hours, being shadowed by F-16s, and just tried to have the last ride of his life, and then committed suicide, put the nose down, said, and by the way, you can listen to the transcript in real time with not actors, but him and air traffic control, ATC, on YouTube. And, he just said, look, tell everybody I'm sorry, but I don't want to go to jail for the rest of my life. And this is the way I want to go out. And he chose an island in the middle of the Puget Sound that was uninhabited, and he dove the plane in there. So the Ballad of Bebo, and he's going to be recognized. Some other people that you might know or not know. Let's see. I'm going to start writing about Marian Anderson, the black opera
Oh.
singer.
I feel like I should know her because I took like classical music courses, but I'm not familiar.
All right, she was married to a white man in 1939, and an opera singer, and sang at the Lincoln Memorial, and was was rewarded with a great career where she sang for kings, queens, emperors, presidents, things like that. Another guy I'm going to write about is called M. Scott Momaday, and he is an American Indian and loved by Robert Redford and a bunch of people. And he won a Pulitzer Prize for his poetry, and also he was an artist and a painter and a lecturer. This may make it or may not make it. It's called Henry, and it's all about, it's the longest thing I ever wrote because, when you write a story or you write a song, the story has to be told in like under 4 minutes. So
Typically, yeah.
yeah, otherwise it'll never get on radio and the record companies won't put it out, and so I started writing about a person named Henry who was 10 years old in 1951, and we follow his life through 2017. And he starts, the song, it's 11 pages of lyrics.
Oh, wow.
And 18 minutes long, the song. And it's all about him growing up you see him grow up in Homestead, Florida, and I'll just give you I'll make it really short. He's the child of an abusive father who's a drunk. His mother is dead. And she comes to him in a dream. She says, "You have to leave, Travis." His name is Travis Dupree. And he gets all the change out of the bait and tackle shop that his father has. And he gets on the train that stops in front of the bait and tackle shop down in Homestead, Florida. And he hands the conductor the money in the middle of the night. He says, "How far will this get me?" He says, "Well, we'll put you off in the middle of the state in the morning." And so he gets off the train, and it's kind of gray light. Can't really see yet. It's dark. And something walks by him, this massive shape. And there's lots of thuds. And then all of a sudden, another one walks by him. And the sun starts to come up and gets accustomed to this low light. And this giant shape turns into an elephant. And a bunch of elephants walk by him. The sun's coming up now, and he looks across the street, and there's a sign that says, "Winter Home of the Greatest Show on Earth, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus." And so he's arrived and was put off right at where the circus, the home of the circus. And there's a woman standing in front of a tent, and she's the cook. And she looks at him and she says, "Hey, you hungry? Come on, I'll feed you. I'm the cook here." And he walks across, and he's got nothing, he doesn't have a suitcase, anything. He walks across, and she says, "You hungry?" And he says, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "Well, I'm going to feed you. So come on, sit down here." And she feeds him eggs and pancakes and juice. And she says, "But at the end of the meal, you have to help me clean up." And he says, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "Okay, what's your name?" And his real name is Travis Dupree. And he says to her, she says, "Well, ma'am, I can't tell you that." And she says, "Look, boy, I'm not going to say hey to you every day, so we'll just call you Henry." And he said, "Well, why Henry?" She says, "Because in the circus, we speak in codes, and Henry is the code for runaway. So you are runaway. So your name is Henry." And from that moment on, he stays with the circus for the rest of his life until 2017, which is the last performance of Ringling Brothers ever has, which is the truth. And you follow him in the song, you follow him going to clown college, and he drives the clown car, and he falls in love with an aerialist that's shot out of a cannon, and makes friends with a great ape and a lion, and the Nigerian ringmaster who speaks in hip hop in the 50s. And it's this great little story. And I think what I might do is try to make an animation out of it.
That would be really neat. I mean, it sounds so fascinating. I love the idea.
Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. I thought you'd like it, and I was going to hip you to it.
Yeah.
But back to here, I'm really proud of this. We did it inside our homes. We didn't do it inside of studios, really. We sent the stems, like I would sit down and do a piano click track and sing kind of a guide vocal. Then a day or two later, Lawrence Juber, who used to be in Wings, he's the co-producer of this, he would send me like the track, and he'd put guitars on it. He said, "Well, what do you think of these?" And they were really cool. And I go, that's really cool. I like that. Then the other co-producer, Tony Bronicle, who produced this one, he'd say, all right, send me the tracks and I'll play drums on them from my house. From his house, he put the drums on. And we did the whole record that way, except for Breathe and Jewel, which we did in a studio, all separated, by the way. We weren't on the same rooms, over at J.J. Blair's house, who mixed the record, so that I could sing live and have a real grand piano on it. But everything was done like in-house. I mean, we'd send the bass player, like, what if it was Hutch Hutchinson, he'd be out with Bonnie Raitt. He's played with Bonnie for 30 years, and he'd up in his hotel room, he'd open his laptop, get the stems, plug in his bass to his laptop or something, and then play the bass down. And that's what we did on the whole record, with the exception of the 2 tracks that came off Fresh Bear tracks, and the 2 tracks we did in the J.J. Blair's house. Was in-house. Yeah, totally in-house.
I've heard about that a lot of artists during COVID, if they get inspiration, like you couldn't go anywhere, or everyone's like in their respective like places where they live. So it was this amazing merging of technology to bring this work together. I mean, it must have been a little bit weird though, right?
It was so weird. I tried to do one song during the start of COVID, when everybody was totally fucking freaked out. There was no, vaccinations. There was no this, there was no that. We didn't know anything, and people were, unfortunately passing away. And so I wrote a song. I heard this therapist say to me, I was talking to her on a phone. She wasn't my therapist. She's a friend. It's Dr. Karen. And I would say, what are you doing? You're not going to go see your patients anymore. They're not coming into your office where they meet you and they sit with you. And she goes, well, we're going to do it on Zoom. And I said, well, is that really this, is it going to work? And she says, yeah. And I said, what are people saying? She says, well, what I tell them is I remind them that we can all get through this together one day at a time. And I went like, one day at a time. Now, I've only heard that about 10,000 times, but it's a great hook. And, I got clean and sober a long time ago.
Yes, I read about that. Yeah.
And I said to Karen, I said, you know what, can I use that? I mean, it's an AA slogan. It's a 12-step slogan, but can I use that? We can all get through this together one day at a time. I'm going to write a song tonight with that. And she said, okay. And I wrote this one day at a time thing that Porto Valley put out really before my Fresh Bear tracks was around. And I said to everybody, let's go in the studio and cut this. And we went in the studio and we were all wearing masks. And I was like wearing, remember everybody was walking around with gloves on?
Yeah.
I played the keyboards with gloves on. And I was in a separate room with a vocal mic that I was singing, and they were going to disinfect the mic over like next 100 days or something. I don't know. So, it was weird. So it was uncomfortably weird.
Definitely some interesting challenges that presented for people in the creative fields. Sometimes challenges that led to great projects, other times challenges that led to inventions of something, so.
Well, I got to watch some things that moved me. Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. It's on my list of things to watch, but I love chess.
Well, in the Book of Secrets, there's a chess song.
What? You're killing me, dude.
Yeah, it's called Playing Chess with the Master.
Who wrote it? Who's ever written a chess song before? I feel like this is going to be groundbreaking. Like, I don't think anyone's written a chess song.
But I've got one. It's all about the deals we make with our higher power to get through things in our lives.
Ooh, that's deep. I like it.
It is very deep.
See, now you're going to have to send it to me early. But
so I use Bobby Fischer as an example. There are different verses in it. It's hard to play chess with the master. Bobby Fischer thought it was his day. But after 3 moves, and I used a move that I saw in Queen's Gambit, he got up and just walked away, which is what he did from one of his championship. He just got up and left Boris Spassky sitting there. So that's going to be his thing. it's hard to get apart, actors, right? It's hard to get apart from the master. Actors always talk about the craft. They're always giving you this craft shit. And thinking it's so unbelievably important, the craft, I love that word. It's hard to get apart from the master. Actors always talk about the craft, but no callback ensued, and they found it rude. That's the way that song goes.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's all about making deals with God. They they had a plan. Let me think of the way it read. They thought it rude when no callback ensued, made plans, but God only laughed. Bobby Fischer thought it was his day, but after a move, knight to rook pawn sacrifice was booed. Checkmated, he just walked away. It's that kind of a song.
I'm really looking
and
forward
then
to
the
it.
and then the tail line is for easing God out of his life. And because you didn't give it to me, so I'm not going to talk to you. You haven't found my file, lately, so I'm not having a conversation with you. I don't. Yeah, so it's you'll like it. It's going to be an interesting song. So that's what I'm working on now.
Nice. I love that. I love that, your previous album and your current album, The Way of the Worlds, and the new one as yet to come, that they're all different, but they're all still deep and meaningful. And just like you said, authentically you, obviously.
Well, yeah, I'm very grateful, and I'm very lucky, and not lucky, but
Fortunate? Oh no,
I'm
that'd be
for
also lucky.
yeah. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That I have a platform to be able to do something like that. We made The Way of the World on a shoestring. I got to tell you, this is the cheapest album I've ever made and ever played on and ever worked on, and I've worked on hundreds. This one was done. Everyone that played on it, everybody that did it for the love of the craft, the love of the art. Really,
Mm-hmm.
it was because they liked the songs, they wanted to play on them, they believed in it, they believed in me, and we wanted something to do, during COVID and also after COVID.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the single, which is "A Change Would Do Me Good," which was the first single, went to number one in the Netherlands, and that was kind of cool. And then I had on the Fresh Bear tracks, I had a song that Stephen Stills and I wrote called "Give It Up" that he plays guitar on, and Walter Trout with him plays guitar on, and that went to number one in the Netherlands. So I'm going to have to go over there and get my wooden shoes, and cheese, and maybe play a gig over there. I've been out all year playing in a blues band. I've never been in a blues band in my entire life. But Walter Trout, who is an iconic blues guitar player, I don't know if you know who he is at all. He heard "Breathe," and he said, "Can I record that on my new album?" And I said, "Sure." So he recorded that. And then he called me up and said, "Would you go out and play with me?" And I said, "Sure." So I've been out all year, Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and all over the place with him. And that's been really a lot of fun.
T-Bear, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And listeners, please check the show notes for links to purchase his albums and for any upcoming shows. T-Bear, anything else you want to say to our listeners before we go?
If you can't help them, don't hurt them.
There you go. All right, as always.
Peace and love.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.